Hi guys, welcome back to Nita Crochets. My name is Anita. I have this very good follower of mine, Gail Scott, who requested for a granny stripe dress that has a V at the front and the back. So first I made this skater skirt whose tutorial is on my channel and the written pattern on my online shops. And now I'm going to be transforming this into a dress. But in this tutorial, I'm going to include both parts. The part for the skirt and the part for the upper bit. She was particular about the upper bit because she wanted a V at the front and a V at the back, and this is what I made sure to make. I only changed the lower bit because what she sent me was a straight dress. So let's get started. So to start off, I have this yarn. It is really thin, okay. It is size 2 yarn. It is it is Seagull. Yeah, it is Seagull size 2 yarn, 100% acrylic. So I'm going to have to double my strands so that I get some sort of thickness which I am looking for. But if you're working with DK yarn, that will be like a great alternative if you cannot get this. Also, I am working with a 5mm hook. A 5.5mm hook. So to start off, I'm going to make a slip knot and I'm going to work chains in sets of 3, right? Chains in sets of 3, and the total number of chains that you work need to be divisible by both 3 and 4, if you know what I mean. So for example, I worked 96 chains, okay? 96 is divisible by 3 and it is also divisible by 4. So why I am choosing chains that are divisible by both 3 and 4 is the first step of the pattern requires us to have a number that is divisible by 3, like you will see, and then the second row after the first one, literally the third row after the second one, requires us to have a number of foundation chains that are divisible by 4, as you will see. I'll be explaining that later in the tutorial, but yes. So I suggested that sizes small can work about 96 minus 1, which makes it 95. Then sizes medium can go up to like 108 minus 1, which makes it 107. So that means you are going to be deducting 1 chain of the total number of chains that you have, because we are working in rounds. Whenever we are working in rounds, we deduct that one last stitch because we are going to be working a slip stitch into the first stitch that started the row. So that means the first stitch acts as our first and last stitch because we are working in rounds. All right. So guys, once you have your chains complete, you are going to work a slip knot into the very first stitch that started your row. Then you will chain 1 and work a single crochet into that very same stitch, and then work 1 single crochet into every chain stitch all the way around until you come to the end of your row. So that means sizes small will have a total of 95 stitches, sizes medium will have a total of 107 stitches, and sizes large will have a total of 119 stitches. All right. So let me let you guys work your single crochets into every chain stitch all the way around, and when you come to the end of your row, you'll work a slip stitch into the chain 1. Then I'll meet you there and show you what to do. So guys, I am at the end of my row. At this point, I had already worked 1 row and then realized I had not hit the record button, so I had to undo it. That's why my row looks kind of messy. But yes, to start from where we ended, after working your slip stitch, you are going to chain 2, and into that very first stitch you're going to work 3 double crochets. So the chain 2 does not act as a stitch, it doesn't count as a stitch. So you work your 3 double crochets and then you're going to skip 2 and get into the next stitch and work 3 double crochets all in that very same stitch. Okay, so like you can see, I have my 3 double crochets. So yarn over, skip 2, get into the next stitch, work 3 double crochets all into that very same stitch. Okay, Once you have that, you're still going to skip 2, get into the next stitch and work 3 double crochets, just like that. And now you are just going to be repeating this all the way around, skipping 2 stitches and working 3 double crochets into the next stitch. And this is what you are going to do for every stitch all the way around until you have 2 stitches left to end your row. That's why I'm going to meet you guys, then show you what to do. Once you are at the end of your row, you're going to skip those last 2 stitches and you will just get into the second chain stitch of the 2 chains that started the row, and in there insert your hook and work a slip stitch to end your row. Okay, now to work the next row, we are going to chain 2, chain 2, and we are going to have to turn our work. It will be kind of hard to like really see exactly where we are going to, you know, insert. It will be kind of, you know, may feel like you're inserting your hook into the wrong gap, but yes, just insert your hook in there. This time I chained 3 because I felt like there will be multiple stitches at my seam line. So you're going to chain 3 and work 2 double crochets into that gap, and then chain 1, work 3 double crochets once again into that very same gap. Okay, it's a good thing that we get Gail exactly what she was looking for. So for you, Gail, on this row, your increases are only going to be on the left hip and the right hip. So you're going to count all the sets of 3 double crochets that you have and mark where your left hip is going to be and where your right hip is going to be. So your increases will only be in the right and left hip. So for us who are making skaters, let's go on. Once you have that, you're now going to yarn over, skip the next 2 stitches and into the next gap. Like you can see, I'm going to work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap. You see that? Then I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches and get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap. Remember the first gap we worked 5 double crochets. We had a chain 3, then 2 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets all in the very same gap. Now for these next ones, we are just skipping 2 and getting into the next gap and working 3 double crochets. Once we have 3 sets of 3 double crochets in the next 3 gaps, we are now going to skip 2, get into the next gap, and in this gap we are going to work 3 double crochets like you can see, chain 1. Okay, so we chain 1 and work 3 double crochets once again into this very same gap, just like that. So that's my second double crochet, and then I'll go in with my third, not my third but 6th. Okay, so you see what we have. Now we are going to get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets in there. Remember, I am working the 6 double crochets after 3 sets of 3 double crochets. So that is 1. I'll get into the next gap and work my set of 3 double crochets, just like that, and then get into my third gap and work 3 double crochets, or my set of 3 double crochets. Okay, now that there are 3 sets of 3 double crochets, I'm now going to work a corner, more like, you know, more like a corner, let me say. So in here, into the next gap, I'm going to work 3 double crochets, right? Chain 1, work 3 double crochets once again into the very same gap. Guys, the granny stripe is really simple, and I see no reason as to why I have to go like really slow. But yes, this is what you do for the next gaps. After 3 sets of 3 double crochets for the next gaps, you work your 6 double crochets, and the 6 double crochets should have a chain 1 in between. So just be counting every 3 sets of 3 double crochets, then work your corners, okay, until you come to the end of your row. Now at this point, this is what I have. I'm trying to put my tripod right. Yeah. At the end of your row, you should have your 3 sets of 3 double crochets. Then you will work a slip stitch into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started this row. I hope you guys got this one really, because the granny stripe is really simple, but this is how your work should look like. The increases, which were the 6 double crochets, have been worked after every 3 sets of 3 double crochets. Now for this row, we are going to chain 3, and the 3 chains are going to act as a double crochet stitch. So into the very first gap, after we turn our work, we are going to work 2 double crochets. After that, we are just going to keep skipping 2 stitches and working 3 double crochets into the next gap. Skip 2, work into the next gap, you work 3 double crochets all in the very same gap. Okay, and then skip the next 2 stitches, work 3 double crochets all in the very same gap. Now for this row, we are not working any increases like we did on the previous row. So when you skip and get into that chain 1 space that was in between the previous increase, we are just going to work 3 double crochets into that chain 1 space, like you can see. So for people like Giles Coat who are making something slightly flary, you are only going to make increases where your left hip is going to be and where your right hip is going to be. Everything else is going to stay the same, but on increases, that's why you have to make your increases. So this is what you are going to just keep doing all the way around, okay, until you get to the end of your row. This time, like I said, we are not working any increments. We are just working our granny stripe the way it should be without any increments. So just be working 3 double crochets into every chain, into every gap, okay, until the end of your row or until the end of the gaps, and then work a slip stitch, skip 2 and work a slip stitch into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started this row. So guys, I'm going to let you go all the way around with this until you come to the end of your row right there and work a slip stitch, okay, in there. And that's where I'll meet you. Now guys, this is why I am at the end of my row and I'm chaining 3. But before I work the next row, let me just show you how it looks like so far. Remember, on this row I never had any increments whatsoever. It's just the normal granny stripe. So this is how your work should look like. Now I'm having my brother disturb me, guys, don't mind him. So into this very first gap, I'm going to work 2 double crochets. First, remember that the 3 double crochets act as a double crochet stitch. So I'm just working 2 double crochets into this first gap and then chaining 1, chain 1 just like that, and get into this very same gap and work 3 double crochets once again in that very same gap, okay? Just like that. Now you're going to skip the next 2 stitches and work into that next gap right there. You get in there and work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap, okay? Skip the next 2 stitches and into that gap you work 3 double crochets all in the very same gap. So those are 2 sets of 3 double crochets, okay? Skip the next 2 stitches, get into that gap and work 3 double crochets once again, all in that very same gap. That makes it 3 sets of 3 double crochets. So once again, you skip the next 2 stitches and work into the gap. So in there, you work 3 double crochets, all in that very same gap, which makes it 4 sets of 3 double crochets. Okay, so that means we are now going to work an increase in this 5th gap. So when we get in there, we are going to work 3 double crochets, chain 1 like that, and work 3 double crochets once again, all in that very same gap. So that means in this gap we have worked 6 double crochets. Okay, see what we have. After those 4, we work that increase. Now this is what we are going to do repeatedly, so let me just take you through it once again. Skip the next 2 stitches and get into that next gap and work 3 double crochets. Skip the next 2 stitches, get into the gap, work 3 double crochets. So those are 2 sets of 3 double crochets. And then skip the next gap, skip the next 2 stitches, get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets. So that makes it 3 sets of 3 double crochets. And we need that 4th set, so we get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets, which makes it a total of 4 sets of 3 double crochets. So that means the next gap is going to have an increase. So to work our increase, we are going to work 3 double crochets, chain 1, chain 1, and then work 3 double crochets once again, all in this very same gap. Okay, so this is what you are just going to keep repeating all the way around for all our gaps. Okay, just work the increase after 4 sets of 3 double crochets. So in there, that's why we will have this increase right in there. Once again, you count 4 and work an increase until you come to the end of your row right there. That's where I'm going to meet you guys after you have worked your slip stitch. So I am here with my row. This is how it looks like so far, like you can see. Now, like I said previously, when we have a row of increase, our next row is a row without any increments. So what's going to happen with this row is we are going to chain 3 and turn our work. Into the very first gap, we are going to work 2 double crochets because the 3 chains act as a double crochet stitch. Now we are going to skip the next 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets into the next gap. Okay, once you have your 3 double crochets, you will skip the next 2 stitches, get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets. So those are 2 and that's the 3rd one. Skip the next stitches, get into that next gap and work 3 double crochets. And this is what we are just going to keep doing for every gap on this row. So this means we are not working any increments whatsoever. Every gap is going to have 3 double crochets in it and not more than that or less. Okay, so yes, even when you get to that chain 1 space that is in between the previous 2 sets of 3 double crochets, in that chain 1 space we are just going to work 3 double crochets, then skip the next 3 stitches and get into the gap and work 3 double crochets in there. You see that? So this is what you are going to do all the way around. We are not working any increments whatsoever. I'm just going to get back and, I'm going to get back on the next row just to show you how it should be worked, because the next row is our last row of increase, and then later I will explain to you the rest. So work this until the end of your row, and I'm going to meet you at the end of your row to show you what to do. Here I am with my work. This is where I am. So I'm just trying to make sure that I didn't miss a clip, honestly. I'm not sure if I missed a clip, but this row is meant to have an increase. So with that, okay, not sure, but let's say, yes, oh yeah, this is the right one. So yes, you chain 3, the 3 chains act as a double crochet stitch, and into the very first gap after you turn your work, you will work 2 double crochets, then chain 1, work 3 double crochets, all in that very same gap. Okay, Now moving on, you get to the next gap, you work 3 double crochets, okay, then skip the next 2 stitches, get into that next gap and work 3 double crochets. Remember, for this row we are working an increase after 5 sets of 3 double crochets, because previously we were working the increase after 4 sets of 3 double crochets. So this time it is 5 sets of 3 double crochets, and what we have so far is 3 sets. So we get into the next gap and work our 3 double crochets, which makes it 4 sets of 3 double crochets. So we need to work the 5th set. So we get into the next gap and work our 3 double crochets just like that. And then after this, we are now going to work an increase just like we did when starting the row. So when we get into this, when we get into this next gap, we are going to work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap, just like that, and then chain 1, work 3 double crochets once again in that very same gap. So we have our increase. Now once we have this increase, we are still now going to do the very same thing we did previously. Skip the next 2 stitches, get into that gap and work 3 double crochets, right? 3 double crochets in there, so that's 1 set. Get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets, which makes it 2 sets, right? Get into the next gap, work 3 double crochets. Those are 3 sets now, right? Get into the next gap and work your 4th set of 3 double crochets. So this is the 4th set, okay, and then to work our 5th set, we get in there and work 3 double crochets, just like that. And now into that gap, we are going to work 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets once again in that very same gap. Okay, so this is what you do for all your gaps, okay? Work the increase every after 5 sets of 3 double crochets. Now I'm going to meet you at the end of the row and then tell you what to do. Now, like you can see, I have come to the end of my row. And at this point, I'm going to do one thing, which is not work any increments anymore until I have the length of the skirt that I desire. So to go forward, I'm going to chain 3. 3 of the chains act as a double crochet stitch. Then I'll work 2 double crochets into that very first gap. Skip 2, get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets. Skip 2 stitches, get into the next gap and work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap. The reason as to why I say skip 2 stitches is because what has to be the 3rd stitch is literally the gap in between that stitch and the next one, right? So yes, we are just going to be working our granny stripes. No more increments whatsoever. These are just enough. We don't want the skater skirt to become a ruffle skirt. So to keep that kind of design, we don't work any increments again from the ones we have worked. So what we do is we are just going to go around with our rows, working just the normal granny stripe rows, normal increments like you can see. So just do this all the way until the end of your row right there and work a slip stitch. Then you repeat and repeat and repeat until you have the length of the skirt that you desire. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to show you how to work your waistline, your waistband, and then I'll let you work the rest of the skirt on your own. So now to work our waistband, we are going to find a point at the back. So this is it. We insert our hook into the opposite side of our foundation chains, and we are going to yarn over and pull through a loop. Now from here we are going to chain 5. I really don't want a wide waistband. I love a simple one, very small and simple. So I will chain 6. Chain 6 and into the second chain stitch from the hook, you are going to work a single crochet, and then you're going to work 1 single crochet into every chain stitch until you go all the way down. All the way down, right? Once you're at the end of your chains, you are now going to work a slip stitch into the next stitch, which is on the opposite side of your foundation chains. Once again, work another slip stitch. Now once you have that, you're going to turn your work, right, and work a single crochet into the last single crochet you previously worked, right in there. Work your single crochet and then work another single crochet, because we are now working all the way up. I had 4 single crochets in total, but I suggest that you have 5 so that you have a wider band, more so if your working size is medium and large. Yeah, because I was working for small, this was okay, but I advise to start with 6 chains and then end up with 5 single crochets. Okay, so yes, you chain 1, turn your work your single crochets all the way down. If you have followed my advice, you should have 5 single crochets. Okay, and once you have your single crochets complete, you are now going to get into the next stitch on the opposite side of your foundation chain and work a slip stitch, and then work another slip stitch into the next stitch. Turn your work and now work along the waistband. So you work your single crochets going back all the way up to the end of your waistband like that. You work your last single crochet in there, chain 1, turn your work. Now we are working all the way back down to the foundation chains. So you work your single crochets once again into every stitch. Make sure that you have the same number of single crochets on every row, or else you will have a narrower waistband if you work less stitches and a wider waistband if you work more stitches. So make sure you have the very same number of stitches, and once you do, you are now going to get into the next stitch on the opposite side of your foundation chains and work a slip stitch. Work another slip stitch into the next stitch on the opposite side of your foundation chains, and now here you turn your work and then work your single crochets going back up. Okay, working into the very first single crochet stitch you previously worked, then go back up. So literally you are just going to keep going up and down, up and down, up and down for all the chain stitches, or for all the stitches on the opposite side of your foundation chains until the end. Then you will get your yarn needle and hand sew the ends of the waistband together to close up your waistband. So guys, this is how your skirt should look like. This is how your waistband should look like. And you can see where I hand sewed the seam together. That's where I'm going to insert my hook. And I'm going to be working on the, on the upper edge. Now we are going to insert our hook in there and pull through our yarn, just like that. And I'm going to chain 1. So what I am going to do for this row is I'm going to work 1 single crochet into every single crochet post along this edge all the way around. So when you look at everything, it's going to just be so easy to see where you have to put your single crochets, because when you work single crochets for your waistband, this girl is disturbing me. So when you work single crochets for your waistband, it is so easy to see where your single crochet post is and where to put your single crochets. So what you are going to do is you are going to work 1 single crochet into every single crochet post all the way around, and you should have the same number of stitches as your foundation chains that you made when starting the skirt. Okay, now for someone who was making Gail Scott's exact dress, you didn't have to work a waistband. You just needed to pick up with your single crochets, because now your single crochets will be worked on the opposite side of your foundation chains. Okay, for us that have a waistband, we are just going to work one single crochet into every single crochet post, like you can see, all the way around, and make sure that the number of stitches you have are the same number of stitches that you had when starting your skirt. Okay, so let me let you guys work this all the way around and meet you at the end of the row once you have your slip stitch done, and show you what to do. So here I am at the end of my row, and now what we are going to do is exactly what we did when we were starting our skirt. Okay, so at this point we are going to chain you can chain 3, because I later corrected that. Chain 3. The 3 chains are going to act as a stitch, and you're going to work 2 double crochets into that very first stitch. Yes, like I said, make sure you have 3 chains, then work 2 double crochets into that very same stitch. And then we are now going to be skipping 2, skip the next 2 stitches and get into the next stitch and work 3 double crochets all in that very same stitch. I have some construction going on in the background. I cannot help it, but I just need to voice this so you guys get it on time. Now we are going to work 3 double crochets into this stitch as well. Yes, and then we are going to skip 2 and get into the next stitch and work 3 double crochets all in that very same stitch. So this is what we are going to keep doing all the way around. Guys, I'm so sorry. There is construction going on. It's annoying me, but I have to get this done. So yes, oh shit. Yeah, we go on with 3 double crochets into every stitch. After skipping 2 stitches, we go on with 3 double crochets into the next stitch, and this is what we are going to do all the way around until we have 2 stitches left to end our row, and we shall work a slip stitch into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the row. So guys, let me meet you at the end of your row and show you how to work the next row. So what we are going to do now is we are going to turn our work. Remember, we have worked our slip stitch, so we are going to chain 3, and the 3 chains act as a double crochet stitch, and we are going to turn our work into that very first gap right there. We are going to work 2 double crochets all in that very same gap, like that. And then we are going to skip 2 and get into the next gap right there and work 3 double crochets in there. Skip 2, get into the next and work 3 double crochets into that next gap. So basically we are going to be ending up with the very same number of sets of 3 double crochets as we had on our very first row of the granny stripe when making the skirt. So we don't need to make any increments whatsoever, because this is like the underbust. Okay, and the underbust usually is, I'm keeping in mind that it's going to stretch out to give us a very good fitting. So whoever is making whichever sizes that you are making, I know that with this you're on track. We don't need to make any increments whatsoever. So yes, just do this all the way until you come to the end of your row and work a skip the last 2 stitches and work a slip stitch into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the row. So let me let you guys work this all the way around, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. And guys, now we're at the end of my row, and this is how my work looks like. So what we are going to do is we are just going to do exactly what we did previously. It's just that we are going to have to repeat it for the next couple of rows, and I'm going to be communicating how many rows I have worked, but you can take measurements from where your skirt starts from, like maybe the high waist, and take measurements going up to your under bust, just below your boob area. Okay, so let me let you guys work your granny stripes until you are at that length. Then I'm going to get back and show you how to work your cleavage and armpits. So here I am, guys. I have worked I think a total of 6 rows. So what's going to happen at this point is I'm going to count all the gaps that I have on my very last row. All right, on my very last row, I'm going to count all the gaps that I have and divide the number by 2. Okay, for example, if I have 32 gaps, I'm going to divide it by 2. Okay, so 32 divided by 2, it gives me 16. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the very first gap from where I ended my row, and then I start counting from the second gap. So counting from the second gap, I'm going to count 16 gaps and mark the 16th gap. Okay, so I'll count from here and mark the 16th gap. Now this is going to help me to know where the center of my front is going to be, so that's where I split my left and right breast from to create the V. I hope you guys understand. So yes, as you can see, I'm going to mark this gap because that's where I'm going to be splitting the V for both the front. No, that's why I'm going to split the V for the front, and then the other one that I already marked is where I'm going to split the V for the back. Okay, so that is it. This is what you are going to do for yourself as well, so that you get a similar result. Now to start our first row for our left, let me say breast cup or left, left breast, we are going to chain 3 and turn our work. Into this very first marked gap, I'm going to work 2 double crochets because the 3 chains act as a double crochet stitch. So I'm going to work 3 double crochets into that very same gap, and then I'm going to skip 2 and work 3 double crochets into the next gap, right? Into the next gap, skip 2 and work 3 double crochets in the next gap as well. Skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next gap, and this is what I am just going to keep doing repeatedly until I get to the marked gap on the other side. So even into that marked gap, I'm going to work 3 double crochets. Okay, so let me let you guys go all the way around, and I'm going to come back once you have gotten to where I have told you to get, right into that gap in there. So your last 3 set of double crochet is going to be worked into that marked gap. I have come to the end of my row, and like you can see, that's how it looks like. So now what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start decreasing. So to decrease, we are going to chain 3 and turn our work. Okay, no, please make sure you have chained 3. Okay, chain 3, turn your work. Now what we are going to do is we are going to skip the next 2 stitches and get into the next gap right there, and in there we are going to work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap. Okay, so the 3 stitches act as a double crochet stitch. All right, yes, so work your 3 double crochets, and then this was me trying to correct the chain 3. Okay, so yes, now we are going to skip 2 and get into the next gap and work our 3 double crochets right there in that very same gap. Skip 3 and work 3 double crochets into that next gap. So this is what we are going to do until the last gap on the row. Okay, So do this until the last gap on the row, and I'm going to show you how to end your row. So let me meet you guys there, then show you what to do. So yes, like you can see, I'm at the very last gap and I'm just working my final double crochet right there. So now to end your row, what we are going to do is we are going to skip the next 2 stitches and work a double crochet into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row. Okay, moving on to work our next row, we are going to chain 3, turn our work. Okay, and we are going to skip the 3 chains act as a double crochet stitch, so we are going to skip the next 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets into that next gap. Okay, right there. So you work your 3 double crochets just like that, then skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next gap, skip 2, work 3 double crochets in the next gap right there. And this is what you are going to continue doing until you have come to like the last set of 3 double crochets. Okay, so do this all the way around until you have come to the last set of 3 double crochets, or the last gap before okay, that will be confusing just a little bit. So let me just meet you guys at the end of your row, so I show you how your row should look like and how you should end your row, because how we have worked this row is exactly how we are going to work the next row. So do this all the way around until you get to the second last gap. That's the last gap. So this second last gap, work your 3 double crochets, then skip the next 2 stitches and work a double crochet into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row. So you're going to follow the same thing we have done for this row for your next row, so that you have a total of yes, for your next let me see, I think I worked 1 2 3, so I think I worked 1 2 3 4, yeah, for your next I think 2 rows, so that we have a total of 4 rows. And then you're going to do the very same thing on the other side, starting from our marked points. Okay, so do the very same thing on the other side, so that you have something that looks like this. Okay, so in total, from the time we split our V-stitch, we have 4 rows. Yes, 4 rows. So just do exactly what we did for our previous row for the next 2 rows. So you have 4 rows, and then copy and paste it exactly into the other side as well, so you have something like this. I hope you guys have understood this part, because I just realized that I lost a clip. So moving on, what now I'm going to do is I'm going to split for my armpit. Okay, so I'm going to count all the gaps I have on this row, right, and then divide the number by 2. For example, if you have 13, you're going to divide the number by 2 and mark the 7th gap. Okay, please, the first little gap that starts with a 3 chain or a double crochet is not counted. We are counting the gaps after every 3 set of double crochets. So I'm going to get my stitch marker and mark that gap right there, which is on the side, so that I know that that's where my sleeve or armpit is going to split from. Okay, so I'm working from here up to there. Okay, then also from there up to there. Okay, so that we have a split for the armpit, right? So let me now get you through how to work this, and then you will just copy and paste on this side as well. And now what we do is, I was just making sure that my knot is secured. So now what we do is we are going to chain 3 from where we ended our row. Okay, you chain 3, and the 3 chains are going to act as a double crochet stitch. Yes, so we are going to chain 3 and turn our work. Oh God, this is even getting closer. So we turn our work and we are going to skip the first two stitches and get into that next gap right there and work 3 double crochets. Guys, I'm just going to make sure that I am louder. It's getting to me. Okay. Yes, so we work 3 double crochets just like that, and then skip the next 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets into the next gap. Okay, skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next gap, and this is what you are going to do until the marked gap. So your last set of 3 double crochets is going to be worked into the marked gap. Okay. So now once we get to the marked gap, we work our last 3 double crochets like you can see. So now at this point I'm going to chain 3 and turn my work, because now I'm going to start working the decreases that I have been working. It's only that this time I'm working just a portion of it, for which is going to be like my breast part going up to the shoulder for the front. So yes, I'm going to work 3 double crochets, and 3 of the chains act as a double crochet stitch. I'll skip the next 2 stitches, and into the next gap I am going to work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap. Then skip the next 2 stitches, work 3 double crochets into the next gap. Skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next gap, and this is what you are going to do until the last gap, which you guys would call like the last gap, sorry, the second last gap, because you guys may also count the 3 chain gap that acts as a double crochet stitch when starting the row. So right there, that's where I'm going to meet you and show you what to do. So as you can see, I have worked my into that last gap, and now to end my row, to have this kind of decrease, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches and work a double crochet into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row. So yes, I was attaching my other color. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain 3 and turn my work. 3 of the chains act as a double crochet stitch, and now when you turn your work, you're going to skip 2 stitches and get into that next gap and work 3 double crochets all in that very same gap. Then skip the next 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets into that next gap. Okay, so remember that I lost a clip, but what we are doing on this row is exactly what I wanted to show you guys on the other row where I lost a clip. So I hope this is very helpful, just in case you got confused from there going forward. Now you just keep working into the next gap, working 3 double crochets into the next gap until you get to, I'm just going to work with this with you guys so that I don't get you confused again, and I'm still so sorry. So once we get to what is more like the second last gap, okay, right there, what we do now is we are going to skip these next 2 stitches, rather 3, and we are going to get into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row right there, and in there we are going to insert our hook and work a double crochet, and that's how you end your row. So this helps us have a decrease at the end of our row. Now I intend to have 3 sets of 3 double crochets on my row before I just start going straight. So if you're working for larger sizes, you may need to stop working your increases once you have like 5 sets of 3 double crochets. But because I'm working for a size small, I'm going to work my decreases until I have 3 sets of 3 double crochets left on my row. Okay, so we chain 3, turn our work, skip the next two stitches and work 3 double crochets into the next gap, then skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next gap, and this is clearly what you do until you come to the second last gap. So as you can see, I am almost there. So this is the second last gap. Once I work my 3 double crochets in there, okay, I am now going to skip the next 3 stitches and get into the third chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row, and in there I will work a double crochet. You see that? So even for our next row, we chain 3 and then turn our work, and we are going to skip the next 3 stitches and work 3 double crochets into the next gap. Okay, and then we are going to skip the next 2 stitches, work 3 double crochets into the next gap. So those are 2 sets of 3 double crochets. I intend to have 3 sets of 3 double crochets before I stop working an increase, a decrease. So once again, we skip 2 and get into that next gap and work 3 double crochets. As you can see, this is my second last gap. Okay, so now I'm going to skip the next 3 stitches and work a double crochet into, you know, the third chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row. Now you can see that I have a visible decrease, right, from my cleavage to from my cleavage and armpit all the way up. Now at this point I am going to chain 3, because now I've stopped working my increases. I'm going to chain 3 and work 2 double crochets all in this very first gap, and I'll skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next gap, right, just like that. I'll work 3 double crochets in there. Okay, and then I will skip 2 and work 3 double crochets into the next gap. Now you're going to realize that on this row I'm going to have 4 sets of 3 double crochets, so it's just the same as you guys. One row is going to have 3 sets of 3 double crochets, then the next row is going to have 4 sets of 3 double crochets. Okay, so when we get to this point, into that very last gap where we had our chain 3, I'm going to work 2 double crochets and then work a double crochet into the third chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row. So even for you guys that have 5 sets of 3 double crochets, on this row you're going to find that you have 6 sets of 3 double crochets, then the next row is going to be 5 sets of 3 double crochets. Okay, so now to work this row I am going to chain 3 and turn my work just like that, and now 3 chains are going to act as a double crochet stitch. So I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets into the next gap, just like that. I'm trying to escape the noise from the construction. I just don't know when they're going to stop constructing, so I need to just let this out. I'm so sorry about the noise this time, but at least you can hear me. Now I'm going to work into the next gap and work 3 double crochets until I get to the last gap, like you can see. And once at the last gap, I'm going to now skip the next 2 stitches and work a double crochet into the third chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row. So like you can see, now we have 3 sets of 3 double crochets on this row, just like I had told you guys it's going to be. So now to work our next row, I'm just going to do exactly what we did for the other row. All right, so we chain 3 of the chains act as a double crochet stitch, and into this very first gap I'm going to work 2 double crochets, and then I will skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next gap, right, just like that, and skip 2, work 3 double crochets into that next gap right there. So yes, I'm going to work 3 double crochets in there, and then work I will skip the next 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets into that very last gap right there. sorry, actually I'm going to work 2 double crochets and then work the 3rd double crochet into the 3rd chain stitch of the 3 chains that started the previous row, right? So now here what we do is we just keep repeating these 2 rows, the previous row and this row, yeah, for the next I think 2 rows. Yes, for the next 2 rows. That will give us enough length from our armpit to all the way up our shoulder. And then I'm just going to get back and show you how to copy and paste, where to copy and paste, and then, you know, close off with the seam line at our shoulder, right? This is clearly the most noisy tutorial I've ever had, and I am so sorry, more so to Gail that I promised to do this for. I'm so sorry. But as you can see, I have come to the end of more like my tutorial. What we have done here clearly for the decrease, as you can see, is what we have here. So we are going to start exactly into that very same marked stitch and work going up, but we are not working here, we are working on the back part, just like we have done everything. Copy and paste it right here, work from here right there in the marked stitch, and then, you know, work into these stitches just like we have done for this other part. And this is what you are just going to keep copying and pasting, but just make sure you start in that marked gap so that everything looks exactly the same. So your decrease will go on and on just like we have done this part, okay? Your decrease is going to have to go on just like what we have done for this front part. You're just going to copy and paste everything from here going up, yeah, so you have it on this side going up until you have similar length and similar decreases, okay, up to up here. And then when you get onto this side, you're just going to do the very same thing. Start from this point right there going up, work from here going up, then work from there going up, okay? So I'm going to get back and just show you how to join the 2 pieces, this and what will be on this point. So we join them at the shoulder. So just to give you an insight of what it has to look like, right there is where you're going to have to start from your back piece and work your 3 chains and then 2 double crochets into that very same gap, and then work 3 double crochets into the next gap, and this you repeat all the way, just making sure that it gives a resemblance. So I just needed to start this row with you guys so that you see what I was exactly talking about, because I missed to show you this when working the cleavage area for the other left side, sorry, the right side, okay? So just do exactly this, start from the marked stitch exactly. That's where your first set of 3 double crochets has to start from, and then everything else is just going to be the very same thing that we have done on this other side that we have previously worked. So let me let you guys work all the way up, and I'm going to meet you once you have all the sides worked and just show you how to join your shoulder. So once you have your 2 ends worked, like you can see, to join the shoulder is very easy. You can either just turn your work in out, you can either use your hook or your yarn needle and just, you know, hand sew it together so that it can look like this, and then do the very same thing for the other shoulder. And once you have all shoulders complete, you will have had your dress complete, and this is how it should look like. So I am so glad that we have come to the end of this tutorial. I'm even so sorry that it is actually getting less noisy at the end of the tutorial, yet it was so noisy during the tutorial. But I'm so sorry, I just needed to get this out on time. Probably you can purchase the written pattern just in case you are confused somewhere in this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, guys. This is how your dress should look like. I hope you learned something or picked something. I'm still very sorry about the noise, and goodbye.